Jumai took a deep breath as she held up the name placard and waited at the airport for the CEO to arrive. She wondered why she hadn't been given a picture to identify him. Something about customer privacy protection. She didn't think it would have made much of a difference. After all, she would be seeing him anyway. She stood there holding the sign high, looking out for any older man who looked wealthy. She had taken this job as a tour guide and interpreter for the summer before her final year at university. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. She needed all the money she could get. Her spending would soon skyrocket. Materials, books, equipment, everything she needed to finish her degree in architecture. She was in a country where people barely spoke English. That alone made her valuable. The job wasn't competitive. Not many could speak fluently, but she could. English was her first language, and that made her the best choice. She was dressed in a professional black suit, though it wasn't required. She'd always been taught to go the extra mile, to be excellent, and to do more than she was paid for. Her braids were fresh, neatly done. She wanted to make the right impression. If the CEO was a conservative, older man, as she imagined, she wanted to appear respectful, composed, and serious. She checked her watch again. How long was this going to take? Then she saw him. A man stepped out from the arrivals gate, and instantly he drew everyone's eyes. He was strikingly handsome, tall, dark, and effortlessly confident. He looked to be of Indian descent, with dark tousled hair that somehow looked perfect, and a neatly groomed beard that made him look like he had just walked out of a Bollywood movie. He wore sunglasses and a simple denim jacket over jeans and a white shirt. Nothing flashy, but he radiated quiet style. Everyone was staring, and so was she. Jumai found herself wishing that the CEO would take his time, because it wasn't every day she saw a man so good-looking in this small city. He was definitely the kind of man she'd be interested in, if only she knew him. She was so lost in her admiration that she didn't even notice he had walked right up to her. He was standing in front of her now. She blinked, startled. Was he looking at her? Did he notice her staring? He waved his hand slightly. Hello. His voice, deep, masculine, made her heart skip before she caught herself. She blinked quickly. Yes. She was already thinking about how to politely decline a conversation, in case the CEO arrived and found her chatting with a handsome stranger. But then he said, I am here. She frowned, confused. You're what? He tilted his head toward her placard, the one she had lowered without realizing, while drooling over him. Her eyes followed, and her heart froze. You're Mr. Keenan? She asked, incredulous. He smiled faintly, his expression calm but amused. Asa Keenan, he said. Pleasure to meet you. He extended his hand. She hesitated, just for a second, then took it slowly. His hand was warm, firm, confident. Ah, I'm Jumai, she said quickly, finding her voice again. I'll be your tour guide and translator during your stay. She straightened up, pushing her emotions aside. The handsome face would not distract her. Not today. She led him to the waiting car. He followed quietly. In the car, she began to prepare her introduction about the city, its landmarks, food, culture, architecture. She had planned it carefully, but before she could start, he began asking her questions. Not too personal, but constant. Where was she from? How long had she been living here? What was her major? How old was she? By the time they arrived at his hotel, he knew everything about her. That she was a final year student in her mid-20s, a Christian, born in another country, and fluent in English. Her well-prepared city guide had gone completely unused. Still, she smiled through it. She translated for him at the reception, explaining the room details, hotel services, and amenities with her usual professionalism. When she turned to leave, he stopped her. Wait, he said softly. He removed his sunglasses, and she froze again. His dark eyes were deep, calm, mesmerizing. She had to pinch herself not to tell him how good-looking he was. Her one weakness, a handsome man. So, he said casually, since you're a Christian, I assume you're going to church tomorrow. He smiled lightly. Do you mind me going with you? Jumai stared at him like he had just said something absurd. Unfortunately, I don't work on Sundays, she replied politely. It's in my contract. She tried to sound calm, though inside, she was panicking. She needed space to think, to pray, to remember that this man was her client. He only smiled again. How about you take me as your friend? I think I know enough about you to be considered your friend. That smile could melt granite. She wanted to say she knew nothing about him, but he was her boss for the month. So she simply smiled and explained that his hotel was far from her route to church. He nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps, he said, you can take me to rent a car. That way, I can drive myself and pick you up for church. She frowned inwardly. He wanted her to help him rent a car on company time and then spend her day off with him for free. He must have noticed her hesitation because he added gently, I'm willing to pay double since it's your day off. Her thoughts changed immediately. $200 for a few hours on Sunday? That was more than generous. She smiled brightly. In that case, please put your luggage away quickly so we can reach the car rental shop before it closes. He laughed softly and followed her lead. The next morning, Jumai waited in the hotel lobby. He appeared, casual, refined, and smiling. They drove together in the sleek black Mercedes he had rented. That's when she discovered he wasn't just curious about Christianity. He was a believer too. He told her he'd been looking online for a church in the city and had prayed to find one. When he learned that she was a Christian, he'd been relieved. I'm glad, he said warmly. Now I don't have to worry about language barriers. I can just worship. She found herself smiling back, and that worried her more than anything. When they arrived at church, it caused quite a scene. She had never come with a man before. People greeted them kindly, but she caught the teasing looks. Some girls even tried to chat with him, clearly taken by his looks. But Asa stayed close to her side. He introduced her as his friend, never mentioning that she was his employee. He blended in perfectly. Charming but respectful, he spoke with everyone, and even the older women liked him instantly. Not once did he let the flirting faze him. Not once did he leave her side. When the service ended, he leaned closer and said softly, I'll triple your pay if you don't leave my side today. She wanted to say no, to prove she wasn't easily swayed by money. But then again, triple pay would mean she could breathe easier next semester. She agreed, smiling shyly. Even when Angelica, the church's most beautiful and confident woman, offered to translate for him, he refused politely. Thank you, he said kindly, but Jumai is my friend. I trust her interpretation. Jumai was stunned. No one ever said no to Angelica. Even more shocking, Angelica kept trying to charm him, and Asa ended the conversation himself. He smiled politely and said, I'm so sorry. We have somewhere to be. Jumai blinked. Somewhere to be? As they walked toward the car, she asked curiously, I wasn't aware we had other plans after this. He opened her door first, and her breath hitched again. He smiled. Well, we didn't, he said lightly, but during the service I thought it would be nice to drive around the city. And, honestly, a good way to escape that woman. I thought she'd never stop talking. Jumai laughed, genuinely, freely. No one had ever said that about Angelica. He smiled at her laughter, then said, So, are you down for a drive? I'll quadruple your pay. She shook her head, half teasing, half serious. I don't think it's wise to throw your money around like that. He grinned. I'm not throwing it around. I'm respecting your sacrifice. You've been such a kind host. She smiled softly. I guess I can't really argue with that. I'll reluctantly accept. He chuckled, pleased. In return, he said, I'll answer any question you have about me. And don't tell me you don't have any questions, because I'm starting to feel like this is a one-sided friendship. She laughed again. You're really something, you know that? All my friends say that, he replied, grinning. They began their drive around the city. Slow, scenic, unhurried. She pointed out important landmarks, told him stories about local places, and found herself asking him questions too. He told her he was 29, that he had started his tech company at 21, that it had many branches, one in delivery. He was in her city to scout the market, to see if he could establish a branch or find local partners. He spoke about business with passion and about faith with gratitude. She listened, amazed. A man that successful, that young, and yet so humble about God's help. Then he turned the questions back to her. He asked about her dreams, her studies, her goals. Why architecture? Why now? And when she spoke, he listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't dismiss. He cared. By the time they stopped for dinner at a quiet local restaurant, she was smiling more than she had in weeks. When he offered to drop her off afterward, she agreed. He insisted she not worry about his way back. He had a great memory. And besides, there was always GPS. As she walked up to her dorm that night, her heart was full. She couldn't stop thinking about him, about his laugh, his kindness, his calm confidence. And she wondered, did he have a girlfriend? Whoever she was, Jumai thought she was a very fortunate woman. She whispered quietly to herself, you need to stop thinking like this. He's your boss. So she prayed that God would help her guard her heart. The next morning came quietly. Jumai had barely slept. She had told herself again and again, he is your client, your boss, nothing more. But her heart refused to obey. Still, she dressed neatly and waited outside her dorm, prepared for another day of work. Before long, a familiar car pulled up. The sleek Mercedes. He stepped out, smiling, warm, effortless, professional. Good morning, he said simply. She smiled back. Good morning, Mr. Keenan. Asa, he corrected gently. His eyes glimmered with that calm charm that made her heartbeat unsteady. Just Asa. And so began their second week. Every day she watched him work. As his interpreter, she sat in on business meetings, helping him communicate with potential partners. He was sharp, intimidatingly sharp. He could read a room in seconds. He was polite but firm. And no matter how some of the men tried, none could outsmart him. By the end of each meeting, he had everyone wrapped around his calm logic. Yet, he never made Jumai feel small. He always asked for her opinion. And when one man suggested they hold a meeting in a bar, Asa didn't even glance at her before refusing. That is not a place for a decent lady to be compelled to be, he said, his tone final, his authority absolute. Jumai sat quietly, stunned. He hadn't asked her to decide. He had protected her without needing to. It was the small things that caught her heart. The way he opened doors. The way he made sure she was comfortable. The way he said, thank you, after every translation. At the end of each day, he dropped her at her dorm. They didn't linger. Just polite smiles and soft goodbyes. But somehow it was enough to make her heart flutter every single time. By the end of that week, Jumai knew she was in trouble. She had prayed every night for God to guard her heart. And yet, the more time she spent with Asa, the harder it became. Saturday came. Her day off. She told herself she wouldn't think about him, wouldn't check her phone, wouldn't wait for a message. But the day passed slowly, painfully quiet. No call, no text, nothing. By Sunday morning, she had convinced herself that he wasn't interested at all, that maybe all the politeness had just been part of his character. She decided to focus on worship, to reset her thoughts. She walked to church alone, but as she neared the gate, she stopped. There he was, standing outside, looking around like he had been waiting for her all morning. When their eyes met, relief washed over his face. I thought you weren't coming, he said softly. Is it okay if we sit together? Her heart skipped. He continued, his voice gentle. I know it must be exhausting, having to deal with me every day. But I promise not to be a bother. Just imagine I'm simply your church member. Jumai blinked, surprised by his sincerity. I do not find you exhausting at all, she said, carefully choosing her words. I actually thought you were exhausted with me, since you didn't message me yesterday. He looked almost scandalized. You're kidding me, he said, shaking his head. I switched off my phone to resist the temptation to call you and ask you to show me around some more. She froze. He said it so casually, so truthfully. Before she could respond, Angelica appeared again as if on cue. Hi, Asa, she greeted cheerfully, her smile dazzling, her tone playful. It was the perfect distraction, because Jumai's heart was racing uncontrollably. If Angelica hadn't interrupted, she might have said something she'd regret. After church, Asa turned to her. Would you allow me to take you to lunch today? He asked. There's a place I've been curious to try. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. At lunch, the conversation flowed easily, calm, warm, comfortable. Jumai decided she needed to ask the question that had haunted her for days. She had to know if he was taken. But before she could speak, Asa turned to her and asked suddenly, "Are you betrothed to anyone, Jumai?" She blinked and then burst out laughing. The sound filled the car as he drove, and she struggled to catch her breath. He frowned slightly. "What's so funny about my question?" She smiled through her laughter. "I can assure you that only rich people ask questions like that. A normal person would probably just ask if I'm seeing anyone." He smiled sheepishly, eyes still on the road. "Well, you're originally from Africa, so I thought maybe your parents—" "Arranged a betrothal," she interrupted, grinning. "Not in these modern times. Isn't that something more common in India?" He chuckled softly. "After 3 generations in England, not anymore. We're far removed from the culture now." He paused for a moment, then asked again, quietly, "Well, are you seeing anyone?" She hesitated, just long enough to feel her heart pound, then said softly, "No, I'm not." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing the words. Jumai took the opportunity to ask him back. To her relief and disbelief, he told her he was also single. He had been for 3 years. He devoted all his time to work and hadn't thought about romance in a long while. They didn't talk much more about it. The air was calm, but charged, a quiet knowing between them that didn't need words. The next week moved quickly. Meetings, lunches, drives. Work felt the same, but everything between them felt different. His gestures grew more deliberate. He brought her the coffee she liked in the mornings. He made sure she ate. He had stopped being just her boss, and she had stopped being able to deny her feelings. Friday evening came. The sunset painted the city in gold. Asa drove her home like usual, quiet music, soft conversation, comfortable silence. Jumai sat quietly, lost in thought. She knew she needed to define things. Her heart couldn't stay halfway between friendship and something more. But what if he didn't feel the same? What if it ruined everything? What if? "Are you now exhausted of having to see me daily?" he said suddenly, his tone light, almost teasing, "and wish to have your Saturday to yourself?" She blinked, distracted, her mind elsewhere, so she only shook her head vaguely. He smiled faintly, misunderstanding. "Ah, I guess you are truly exhausted then. You can be honest, it's been a long week." The disappointment in his voice snapped her back to reality. "No," she said too quickly. "No, I'm not exhausted at all. It's been busy, yes, but really fun. You're very thoughtful and kind." She hesitated, then added softly, "If you need me to show you around on Saturday, I can. And you don't have to pay for my services. Let's just go as friends." He turned to look at her. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared, his expression unreadable. Then he took a deep breath, closed his eyes briefly, and exhaled. "Actually, Jumai," he said slowly, "I was thinking about asking you to go out with me. Not as a friend, but as a date." The words hung in the air. Jumai blinked. Once. Twice. She wasn't sure she'd heard him right. He must have taken her silence as uncertainty, because he began to speak again, quickly this time. "I already asked your agency if it was against their rules," he said. "They told me it wasn't. I'm not looking to play around. I've been attracted to you for a while. I truly want to date you. And I understand if you don't feel the same way. But I'd at least like a chance to win your heart, since you're not in a relationship. Yes, it's been a short time, but that doesn't change what I feel." The man who had commanded business rooms with ease, who'd spoken with calm power, was now rambling nervously, his confidence unraveling right before her eyes. And Jumai, sitting quietly in the passenger seat, felt her heart melt. She smiled softly. "Asa," she whispered. He stopped talking. His eyes met hers. She took a breath, her voice warm and certain. "I would love to go on a date with you." He froze just for a second, then smiled. A slow, genuine, relieved smile. And in that quiet moment, everything changed. The story that began with a wrong assumption at the airport, a name placard, and a stranger's face had turned into something neither of them had expected. A beginning. An unexpected turn of events that changed both their lives forever.